Namaskar, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. And as you all can see, I have with me Miss Cleo Paskal, who's going to tell us, let's talk about geopolitics, what's happening around the world. There is a lot, and there is so much more that needs to happen as well. Trump is coming, he's threatening to shake the apple cart. China is worried. India is wondering what this game is going to be. And of course, the rest of the world is also guessing what's happening. So let's take the opening comments from Cleo to find out what does she feel about Trump coming into power. Namaskar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. Well, it's all I like it better when we're the same size, if
Okay,
that's okay
sure.
with you.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Uh I'm used to being smaller than ever. People can't tell by the video, but I'm actually about 3'2". So, being bigger makes me feel very uncomfortable. I'm watching what the personnel is. So personnel is policy, right? You know that old
Hmm.
expression. So you're trying to figure out who's going into which positions, why they're going into those positions, what can be gleaned both from Trump making those picks, but also what they've done in the past. So one of the things that um, I've discovered, because I haven't been involved in or near a transition like this before, is that currently in Washington, the most popular book is something called the Plum Book. Have you heard of the Plum Book?
Yeah. Once,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. So the Plum Book, which you can see online now, is a list of it's a government document, and it's a list of thousands of government jobs. And these are the jobs. So you'll get, there'll be the Secretary of State, but then there'll be scores or hundreds of other political appointments within the Department of State, um, for um, for everything you can imagine. And those jobs are all listed in the Plum Book, including the names of the people who hold those positions currently. So people who are trying to get into the administration at those middle or lower levels, not the big names that are being announced by Trump, for example, on True Social, but all the ones that are going to actually implement and fill out the policies. Um, there's a kind of a desperate scramble to try to get your name on those lists that go to the transition team. And so what often will happen if you're not already known is that you pick the 3 jobs you want from the plum list and then text it to the person you think is close to the transition team. And then that might be somebody in a think tank or somebody who's worked for them before or something like that. And then the transition team, uh, in theory, looks at these different lists and sort of collates them. And if a name is recommended by multiple different people and for more or less the same job, then maybe they'll be interviewed for that position at that point.
Hmm.
So there's a kind of it's a very never seen anything like it. There's a mad scramble for jobs now, and the problem with that structure is that the in some places, in some situations, the right people rise up to the top, but in some cases, people uh, who are very good are much more shy about pushing themselves forward,
Yeah.
and so they might not be as easy to find by the transition team as the people who are more willing to just call up everybody they know and do it the way that it seems to be done. So while while we're getting the big names, waiting to see sort of that middle layer and the and even sort of pretty niche ones to figure out where the policy might go. Like there were some people involved in some of the Pacific Islands stuff the last time around who were really really good. I don't know if they'll be going into the new administration or not. So to understand what the policy will be in the Pacific, I would like to wait to see who ends up getting chosen. They have very good
Hmm.
people to choose from, people who've been who are proven in the past, but they might not want to go in. They might go into a different position. They might, um, So I'm holding. I don't have enough information to go on.
That's the problem, that it's kind of unpredictable as to what this guy is going to do. And as far as the policies are concerned, everybody is kind of looking at the history of what he did in 2016 to 2020. Um, we see him antagonistic with China. We see him antagonistic with Iran. We see him antagonistic in with the Europeans, and that's something which we foresee even now because of what he's saying. Having said that, how do you see the pushback from the establishment to him? Although what we see right now is an effort to literally spoil things around the world. Uh, the escalation with Russia, the issues with India, and these are two big powers at the end of it. You basing your entire Indo-Pacific policy on India. Um,
Yeah.
you kind of antagonize that country. It's going to be difficult for India to trust. And you look at what's happening in Russia. It's like nuclear, nuclear, nuclear. Everybody's worried. Although I don't think Putin will do something that stupid, but why go into that entire place?
Yeah, no, it's I mean, that that sort of stuff is sort of uh, front page
Scary.
and
Yeah.
incomprehensible. Yeah, but at the same time, domestically, the border is still open.
Hmm.
They're pushing through judicial appointments, pretty high level judicial appointments through the Senate as quickly as they can. There are a lot of other things that are going on that are more reported domestically in the U.S. that are of a similar incomprehensible scale as you can see on the you see the geopolitical stuff. So, but here I happen to be in the U.S. at the moment. They're reporting more on things like the judicial issue around judicial appointments and the border and things like that. Um, or the Matt Gaetz thing was
Hmm.
filled up the press for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a very fraught time. And what's interesting is a relative collapse of CNN, MSNBC,
Hmm.
those sorts of medias, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so the confusion, because I think they were anticipating that he would lose the popular vote.
Yeah.
And if you lot and so the narrative would be built around that, the lack of legitimacy based on losing the popular vote. But he's won the popular vote.
Hmm.
So how do you build a narrative around that? This is he's won the electoral college on the popular vote, and he's he's reaching people that are considered traditional, obviously not anymore, but were considered traditional Democrat voters, Hispanic community, black men, things like that. So their
Yeah.
narrative is in complete disarray. Um, so they're pushing back with um, the sort of things that you would normally see, like these judicial appointment type stuff and the border being open, but the narrative packaging and the narrative delivery uh, is not functional like it was, even just before the election. So that's new. It's a sort of new sort of dynamic, and I'm not quite sure where that's going to go. And for my own in my own situation, for example, if I want to try to get a sense of what's going on in the transition, you know, there's for me, there's no point watching something like CNN or things like that. You have to watch Bannon's War Room, or read Breitbart, or look at you know some of those sorts of venues, because those are the ones that are really much closer to the Trumplican party. It's not the Republican Party; it's the Trumplican
Yeah.
party.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not even Fox. It's a whole other group of people.
Hmm.
Um, like if you want to know I wanted to know more about what um, the nominee for the Secretary of Defense what he thinks about it. He's written books. He was a Fox host, but he did a
Yeah.
really long interview with Sean Ryan, a podcast
Yeah.
interview with Sean Ryan,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's where you go. You don't You don't go to CNN or Fox or whatever, you
I
go to
did
Sean
that.
Ryan.
I saw that podcast, and I kind of know what he thinks like.
Yeah, that's right. So it's the transition or transformation, whatever it is, isn't just political. It's also narrative and media.
True.
So yeah. So we'll see. We'll see where it ends up. But again, uh, things are moving so quickly and in ways that are being countered very aggressively by all sorts of different sides that it's really hard to know where it's heading.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is the factor that, as I was just speaking before in the last question, is that antagonism with China is something which is expected out of a typical Trump policy, right? Everybody thinks that he's going to go after it, and most likely he will, because if you notice in his previous version or previous term, he kind of reinstated the Quad. He did a lot to kind of push China into a corner and get the world to kind of understand what China was.
Hmm.
That's one of his biggest achievements. Calling out the China virus openly, where everybody, no, 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 this is not China virus and this and that. And he was the only guy who came out and said it's the China virus.
Hmm.
I'm not blaming them for it, but this is what it is. That's how you name diseases. So that's a little sense of pragmatism in his approach, which was there. Of course, bunched up with a lot of hubris. There's that's
He's
typical
a New
Trump.
York. He's a New Yorker.
Yeah, that's typical Trump. I mean, that's fine. That's, yeah, typical New Yorker. Uh, how do you think he's going to approach China in this term? Because what I read from China is they're worried, and they're
Yeah.
not just
So
worried; they're freaking worried.
yeah.
What's going to happen
So
here?
they're. I mean, he's very clear. I mean, he's America first, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
very
yeah.
clear, and which frankly is the job of every elected official is to put their people first. That's not complicated. The only question is how do you define what that means? And he's defined it in pretty classical defense and security and economic terms. Um, and with China, uh, if China would stop trying to game the economic system and attack the U.S. with fentanyl imports and trying to undermine you know, the freedom of navigation and sending weapons to building tunnels in Gaza and doing that sort of stuff, then no problem, right? So, it's not I prefer to think of it as active defense rather than antagonization.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
I look at countries like in the Solomon Islands now, where the CCP has an enormous amount of control, and what's happening to the Solomon Islanders on the ground as a direct result of that is is horrific. They're getting their leaders are selling them out. The police force is becoming a political weapon.
Mhm.
We'll see how the judiciary stands up. But there are two of them, but one in particular political leader who's been trying to stand up to the Chinese since the switch in 2019 from Taiwan to China. Um, they've just laid charges against him. Could
Yeah.
totally made up charges. And um, the question is, you know, the U.S. the China Select Committee tweeted about it, but the Australians haven't said anything, and in fact, the Australian High Commissioner won't even meet with him. Now, is
Mhm.
that a direct byproduct of Australia wanting to sell more lobsters to China, and so they don't want to annoy them in the Pacific Islands? Let's have that discussion, right? But in the meantime, you know, we often talk about this US China dichotomy, but there are a lot of just very good people who are trying to live their lives who don't want, their forests clear cut and their women trafficked, and um, want a chance for their kids to live in dignity and be able to go to school, that are the that are leading the way in the fight against the CCPification of their countries. And if a little bit more effort would be made, if, for example, a Trump administration would like to help investigators take a look at where the money from the Chinese is going, because the Chinese will bribe leadership in countries, but they don't want to. The leadership doesn't want to spend that money in China. They want to spend it in Australia or New Zealand or the U.S. Right. So if you start to raise the cost of taking the Chinese money right now, take the Chinese money, you get away with it, right? You don't take the Chinese money, you get punished, you lose your job, life is miserable. So you have to change that cost benefit analysis. You have to make it costly to take the Chinese money, to be corrupt, to sell out your people. And that's something that, it's not, when you think about defense, you think about ships and planes and guns, but we're in a political warfare battlefield here,
Hmm.
and you can fight back on the political warfare battlefield very effectively with some investigators, a few lawyers, some prosecutors, and it can do a ton of damage, or it can to Chinese intentions, and in the process protect good people from CCP attacks. So, what would a Trump policy on China be like? I think, given some of the picks that we've seen so far, there's an understanding of political warfare and how political
Mm.
warfare, um, can is incredibly damaging. So, I would hope, and expect that the defense against Chinese aggression, active defense against Chinese aggression, would be much more broad spectrum and include more effective pushbacks. Is this sort of thing like India? India led the way on this. After Galwan, 2 weeks later, you banned 59 Chinese apps, including TikTok and WeChat, right?
Yeah.
And and Trump, the Trump administration at the time, openly said, "That's a good idea. We're going to try to do it too," and did an
Yeah.
executive order trying to ban, and couldn't get it through.
Didn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's something that political warfare battlefield is something that India knows very well. You've been in the same way that Australia hasn't been liberating Solomon Islands. You've been trying to liberate Maldives and Sri Lanka and, other Indian Ocean countries. So I hope that there will be a comparing of notes about how to fight effectively in the political warfare battle space, and that another arena that potentially could be added to the Quad, or even just bilateral, so that this broad spectrum active defense can bring some relief to the people in places like Solomon Islands, who are on the front line of this, and who are literally fighting for their freedom, and if not their lives.
That's the whole problem. This whole, and where I have an issue is, and I kind of look at it in another different way, is that America needs to revive its economy as well. The economy in 2016 was still much better than what it is today. So I
Mhm.
just hope he doesn't compromise. Like, I mean, of course, a lot of propaganda on his picks are, some people say he's kind of kissed the ring of the powers that be. Um, People are a little apprehensive about that, and of course, we know that he will go after the tariffs and this and that and all that stuff he will do.
Mhm.
How far will that actually go is something which will be interesting to find out.
Well,
As
when
far
when
as
he when sorry, when he picked JD Vance as vice president, that was also an indicator, because JD Vance, has a lot.
yeah,
He grew up in an area that's just been ravaged by CCP policies.
yep,
The deindustrialization, the pumping in of fentanyl, all that sort of stuff. He's lived it, and he knows what it is. And he served in the military, so he definitely, and I mean, he's got just he's in a position to understand this stuff extremely well. And so the he represents his voters He is very representative of his voters. So I think that was the first indication when Pres- President Trump chose him as a running mate that he was going to be serious about this stuff. And then the other picks are they've been very interesting picks. These are I don't know if you remember, but when President Trump, at the end of his last term, there were a bunch of charges. Got he was having a hard time finding a lawyer to defend him.
Yeah.
It was really he was really in the wilderness. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
slowly over the last 4 years, the the he, a group of people have come around him who are fighters. You can, if he had lost the election, uh, it's the people who had openly supported him over the last few years
Oh man.
were potentially at risk.
Yep.
So they this is a different battle hardened group of people who, and his picks seem to be prioritized, at least in large part, on loyalty. So this is in that way, I think this is a very different start to an administration, 47 than 45. So we'll see. We'll
So
see
so.
how. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, no, no. What you said is very interesting, but there's also the factor that he's picked out a few people which who are from the proverbial, who are, probably, I don't know how to put it across. I mean, his pick for JD Vance is very interesting, backed by guys like Peter Thiel, BlackRock, the whole spiel right there. And that's something that tells you that he's not wanting to break the power structure, rather kind of work with the power structure and find his own
I
way,
mean, yeah, I'm not
which
sure.
is,
I mean, Peter Thiel, he's an interesting guy.
yeah,
Uh,
very interesting.
yeah, yeah, and he's not. He's been he's been his own guy in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. Yeah,
In 2016, they you remember how they went after Peter Thiel,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And how, I mean, antagonistic they were with him
yeah.
in 2016. And today he's like the biggest power broker in Washington.
I mean, he has he. I think he did him and Joe Kent. I think he also did. No, not Joe Kent. Anyway, I don't consider, I could be wrong, but I don't consider Peter Thiel part of the establishment. I
No,
think
he's
he's
not.
yeah, yeah.
No, he's not.
So I don't see that backing as indicative of a mainstream direction. Um, but
Seems to be
I'm
the new
just
establishment, if I may.
sorry.
Seems to be the new establishment. The tech guys seem to be kind of taking up the mantle and kind of moving forward, and that's very interesting because you have people like um, Zuckerberg saying, "Sorry, I did what I did. I am really sorry. I am off. Thank you so much. I'm done," and he walks off. Jeff Bezos walks off. These are guys who Washington Post is a mouthpiece. I mean, if he walks off, you know that the ship is kind of turning around. And
It's very interesting times, that's for sure.
yeah, let's talk about India a little bit. There's been a lot of tension between India and Canada. We spoke about it last time. Trudeau, I love him, honestly. I've developed a sense of respect for the guy. Why? Because everything else is changing. He says, "No, I'm gonna go back to what it was," and he's kind of damaging himself, which is amazing to me. But there's tensions between America and India as well, right? The whole Adani issue happened, and uh, there are these pathetic cases which are running across. The judiciary in America is kind of being weaponized, which we know it is highly weaponized. Look what they did to Trump. So the reactions in India are like yeah, well, whatever, do what you want to. That's kind of leading to a certain amount of lack of trust. How do you think, does he really want to work on that? I don't know if you've heard this. Kurt Campbell, the CSIS interview yesterday, where he was sitting and he spoke about the problems between India and America as being domestic political problems. Now, those are very interesting words. Domestic political problems. Are you talking about domestic in America, or are you talking about domestic in India?
Yeah, so
Because if you're talking about
I
domestic
didn't,
problems
yeah, I
in
didn't,
India, you have no
yeah.
business kind of interfering in that.
No, yeah, I didn't see that. Uh, uh, that's uh, unfortunate if that, if that's, you I said he wouldn't, I
Those were the
don't think,
words used, and I was
yeah,
like,
I mean,
"What?
yeah, I
What's
mean,
wrong with these people?"
yeah, I think, it certainly wasn't a fight that was picked by India, right? So, if it was a domestic political issue that was used for some sort of political leverage, you'd think it would be equally initiated. Excuse me. Sorry.
That's
I'm
fine. God
I'm
bless you.
I'm I'm allergic to domestic politics of this ilk. Um
Ah, okay, fantastic.
yes, thank you. Uh so uh, I don't know. I'd like to see the clip. I think that's probably an important clip. But um they're on their way out. So we'll see.
It seems
Um
like a scorched earth policy, you know. It's just destroy every damn thing.
it's incomprehensible to me. The use of the missiles in particular I, is very dangerous. That I really anyway. But yeah, but I don't know what's going on. And what I'm hoping is that things like encouraging signs, like Trump's Diwali tweet, um,
Mm, yeah.
give a bit of breathing space, and we'll see what happens. We talked about this before, that foreign countries, feel like the U.S. is not reliable or predictable, or however you want to put it. Um, for example, in the case of India, with watching what happened with the Afghan withdrawal, or with Bangladesh, or with the sort of things that you're describing now. Uh, and similarly, clearly, about half of the U.S. voting population feels the same way, right? And is not happy with the direction that the country's leadership has been going in. So this is what you get with democracies. And now we'll see how much of a change there is when the new administration comes in. Now, of course, that means that you might have 4 years, or however long, that where India and the US can really work together properly, but then you get another administration in where it can't. Now, as it happens, I just uh, uh, contributed to a book that came out in India that was looking at Prime Minister Modi's 10 years. And to do the research on that, I went back to articles I wrote about India 11 and 12 years ago. And 11 and 12 years ago, what I was writing about was the deep corruption around the Sonia Gandhi government, and how Forbes was calling her the, I can't remember what it was, I think number ninth most powerful person in the
Mhm.
world, and Manmohan Singh was 18th or something like that. And there was scandal after scandal going on, and it was a government that uh, was not. It was very, very different.
Don't give me nightmares, please.
Well, that's the point. This is what you get with a democracy. There'll be ups and there'll be downs, and it could be a U.S. administration that's not ideal, and it could be, it has been. There've been some Indian administrations that aren't ideal, but the trend. between India and the US is so deep on the people to people and the economic and the, um, just person to person compatibility that I think that it'll ride through. That part of it is much more important and deeper and will maintain.
Well, I hope so, because the thing in India is that we don't trust these guys anymore.
Yeah, I mean, neither do the neither do the American people.
Hmm.
I mean, or at least about half of the voting population doesn't trust its own didn't trust its
I mean,
yeah.
honestly, the if you ask a person on the street, do you want to work with Russia or America? You'll say, where's the question? Russia.
Mhm.
It's as simple as that. Because see,
But
Russia
if you
might
ask
have,
them but
yeah,
if you ask them, would you like to, uh,
go to Russia or America. It's
work in
always
Russia
obviously
or
there,
anywhere?
but
Yeah.
that's also changing today. A lot of people saying, I don't want to go anywhere.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean,
It's
that's
it's it's
yeah.
there. I mean, I let me just say this, that you will find a lot of people who would still want to emigrate and stuff like that, which is true. But there are a lot of people, I've not heard this, that a lot of people are now saying, enough, yeah, I want to come back home.
Yeah.
What am I doing in this place?
Yeah.
They keep fighting with my country. They keep doing this. They keep really trying to embarrass us on the world stage. Why should I put my money in this place? Why should I embarrass? Why should I give taxes to this country? Because my taxes are being used against my home nation.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are, I know a lot of people who've come back. I know a lot of people who are saying, yeah, fair enough, we'll ride it out. But I know a lot of people who are saying, enough, I'll come back.
Yeah.
I'm done with this place. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect as well. And but honestly telling you, in even in the power circles, um, leaving alone personal ambitions, the trust factor, I don't know how these guys plan to rebuild it. And it's not going to be Tulsi Gabbard, who's like me, tilakdhari, and will wear a tilak and do her pujas, and Vivek, who's also a Hindu. Um, it's not. I mean, we are not going to get swung away with that. It's just not going to work. That's my main problem, because I know one thing for a factor, that the India-US relations, Obama brought it to a certain point, but Obama was again a lot of antagonism behind the scenes, right? He
Mhm.
When he came here, he made these weird statements about freedoms and democracy and this and that and all that. That the reason people like Trump in India is because people say that Trump defeated the Soros gang,
Mhm.
right? And that's good for us.
Mhm.
So people might not be happy with Trump itself, but they're happy with the factor that this guy, took out that whole leftist establishment, that whole Soros gang, which was sitting there. Uh, we've not gone a month without anything,
Mhm.
for the past 2 years at least. Every month, something stupid or the other, and then they backtrack, like the Canadians just did. Oh, we have evidence, everybody's involved, and now they say, no, 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 nobody's involved. No, no. So it's
Mhm.
it's it's weird, and so the trust with the West is absolutely zero, and that's sad.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad. But it's understandable. There's been there was so many disappointments. There was the financial crisis of around 2008. There was uh, obviously the Afghan withdrawal. There was COVID, the management of
Oh,
COVID.
people
There was
don't bother about all that. You know what people are bothered about? Sorry to interrupt you. You know what
please,
people are
yeah,
bothered about in India?
hmm
It's not about all that stuff. People don't care. Fair enough. Yeah, you wanted to go from Afghanistan. Fair. We'll figure it out. We know the Pashtuns pretty well. We'll deal with the Taliban. That's not a problem. You know where people got upset? People got upset with election interference. People got upset with Bangladesh. What's happening in Bangladesh? Hindus are dying left, right, and center. Right now, if India does something militarily, oh, the world is going to crack down on us, saying, oh, look at these guys, Hindus, fascist, and all that nonsense, killing innocents and stuff like that. There are people dying there every day, and we know who
true.
did that, right?
Mhm.
That's one. Two, people don't like this interference election. You interfere with our politicians, you run narratives, you term our nationalism as fascism. I mean, we love our country. There's what's wrong in that? So you look at the narratives that were put across to Modi and Trump,
Mhm.
and here is where I want your comment. Modi is a Hindutva fascist, Hindutva nationalist fascist. Trump is a Christian nationalist fascist. This is the last election for when Modi was getting elected. This is the last election where Trump was getting elected. He's a dictator autocrat, dictator autocrat. Same playbook.
Mhm.
So people know this, people see this, and if people in India are saying, "Well, what's wrong with these people?" They call anybody they don't like a fascist.
Mhm.
So that's what people are upset about. People don't care about these, COVID, this, that. That's all gone.
Mhm.
It's past now. It's finished. Because
Mhm.
see, in India, whatever said and done, COVID was handled well. A lot of
Mhm.
people died. There's no question. But people realized that we were better than 99% of the world. So people like, fair enough. We went through a bad crisis, came out of it. Money is being made again. That's fine. It's all right. Let's move forward. People are not bothered about all that. People get antagonized with these, you know, faltu commentary, if I may. Faltu is basically just useless. It's a
Mhm.
word for useless. Every second day, the State Department will come out and give a statement. Oh, we expect India to do this. Who the hell are you?
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's the problem. And that's the common man today who's getting antagonized. It's not about these geo, bigger, trade, political issues and all. Nobody cares about all that. So it's probably you and I who will start talking about trade tariffs and this and that and all that stuff. But the common guy is like, you don't disrespect my country.
Mhm.
I don't know how
Yeah.
to get back from that.
Well, I would expect so I mean the India file has, from the way I understand it, been led more from the Department of Defense, and a lot of that's very quiet, right? But State Department has been um, following a certain path. Under if Rubio is confirmed, I would expect that to change substantially. It was different under the first Trump administration, very different. You pointed out the Quad being resurrected, and also the defense agreements were signed, and there wasn't the sort of thing that you've just described going on during the last Trump administration. I would be surprised if it would happen again under the Trump administration, under a new Trump administration. Um, so we'll see that there's a whole uh, change that is being discussed. If you saw the Pete Hegseth interview, so he's talking about what's happened to the U.S. military
Yeah.
over the past 20 years or so,
Mm-hmm.
and the transformation that they're talking about that results, I would argue, in some of the approaches that have been used by the State Department, um, are are part and parcel of the kind of things that a new Trump administration, the people who are being put forward in a new Trump administration, are saying they want to change. So if you're describing from a U.S. perspective, U.S. State Department attitudes towards India resonate very loudly in India. In the U.S. context, they're not they're not a big deal, right? They're not the State Department people who are doing that are not high profile within the U.S. Americans would be even even people who are engaged in politics. Many of them, and I've spoken to them at think tanks in DC, don't know what's going on in Bangladesh. They don't know how India feels about,
Yeah.
yeah, about it. It's just not. It's a very it's a very inward looking
Yeah.
uh, uh,
System.
Yeah, and just the language, the discussions that go on, they're very people will know more about, the election count going on in Arizona than they will about what's happening to Hindus and Christians and others in Bangladesh. It's just not getting covered. And so
Yeah.
so it, but it is, I would argue, I think, part of a whole system. The fact that State Department has taken this approach and has gone down this road is not an outlier in the general way that that whole system has been operating recently, and which is evident in things like the sort of things that Pete Hegseth spoke about in the US military.
Hmm.
They're part of the same universe, right? The same sort of people who come through the same education systems, who read the same media, who have the same approach, probably think their approach in Bangladesh and their approach to the US military have been successful and a good idea. If you know what I mean. So if when the new administration comes in, if it goes after that um, approach that has been going on over the last 20 years, with some changes during the last first Trump administration, but he didn't really know, obviously didn't know how things worked to the degree that he does now. Then you may start to see that all of that change, you know for better or for worse. I'm just saying that I think that this is uh, you are seeing it's like an elephant, right? Where you're seeing the trunk of it pop up in Bangladesh, and that one of the feet is the way that the DoD has been operating, and another foot is launching the missiles into Russia, and that whole behemoth has been growing bigger and bigger and acting the way it has more and more over the last 20 years. And now somebody is coming in and saying, we don't like the look of this animal, and we may be going in a different direction. Whether they
That's
can,
re- that's real
sorry,
smart, by the way. Firing missiles into Russia. It's a master stroke of smartness.
I mean, it's on par with not saying anything about Bangladesh, and um,
It's just-
and changing some fundamental aspects of how the U.S. military operates. I mean, these are these, and I mean, I'm using these three examples, but there could be half a dozen other ones. I mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
actually, there could be
Of course. Yeah.
half a million other ones.
No, no, no. I
I
get
mean,
what you're
look at
saying.
the
I get what you're
border.
saying. Yeah,
Look at the U.S. border.
yeah.
You look at the U.S., but it's insane. I mean, I look at Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, which is part of the United States. It's shares a maritime border with Japan. That part of the United States allows Chinese to arrive without a visa. No
Yeah,
visa at all, nothing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and the new delegate representative to Congress from CNMI is pushing for a cap lift on direct flights from China. So she's pushing for direct flights from China where the Chinese don't have to have a visa into a part of the United States. They're not supposed to leave from there, but already they're illegally taking boats from from there to Guam, where they're highly strategic military locations.
Oh,
So
great. That's
yeah,
nice to hear.
yeah. So you have your legitimate complaints about the US government, but imagine if you're an American taxpayer and you're looking around going, "What what is this?"
Yeah, I'll
What
tell you what that is. Yesterday night, I was like, okay, fine. I had nothing to do yesterday, so I had no shows and stuff. I had put up a recorded show, and I had free time. Saturday night normally I just kind of give it to myself. So I was sitting and thinking. I said, okay, They want to destroy the world. Fair enough. They want to kind of kick all of us and they want to kind of control all of us. I can understand. They will put us through LGBTQRST games. They will do all this stuff. Fair enough. Why are they doing it to themselves?
Yeah, so I think I think there are a few different strands that are coming together. Uh, I you
That's
know
the that's the question I can't answer. Why are you doing it to yourself? I mean,
mhm.
kill the
So,
world. Fair enough.
yeah, so I think there's some people who uh, who believe it's the right thing to do, but there's some people who are fundamentally anti-American, and you get that through the education system to a large degree.
Mhm.
But I think that a lot of it is also being fed through very successful political warfare campaigns from things like that, from organizations like United Front or Chinese United Front organizations who get onto the campuses and who push for things. I mean, we've seen this developing for a very long time. In the early 70s, there was a uh, acupuncture clinic set up outside of Manhattan, just outside of Manhattan, which was run by the Black Panthers and the Young Lords. And what the United Front organizations are very good at doing is identifying real grievances, exacerbating them, and then pushing you towards the wrong direction. So they had some real grievances, genuine grievances, and there was a whole wave of men who are coming back from the Vietnam War with some very serious problems, and so they set up this acupuncture clinic uh, with like Maoist posters. And part of it was, as they were doing the acupuncture, they would give political training, right? So, and this is the early 70s, and one of the women that was doing the acupuncture was later convicted on terrorism charges. She was involved in the Brinks truck robbery.
How nice.
Yeah, and she was, pardoned under, I think, the Clinton administration, released, and then she went on to the board of the Thousand Currents, which was an organization that helped run the money for Black Lives Matter. Yeah, so, I mean, there's some very, again, genuine concerns, but then it gets, I mean, then if you allow it to be co-opted for other political purposes, it becomes you end up with this sort of a situation. So the point of that story was, the Soviets were doing it, and so were the Chinese. If you take a look at what happened in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia to Zimbabwe, originally it was the North Koreans that were backing them, and then it expanded and evolved into the Chinese backing Mugabe. Um, they've been doing this for a very long time. This isn't new. We shouldn't be surprised, and they're very good at it. And there's been uh, a political warfare operation. It's not the only reason, but I think that has affected quite deeply in many cases the way that at least China is viewed in the academic circles. I mean, a lot of money also comes out of China for the Chinese students and and the scientific cooperations and things like that. But along with it come these levers of what I think of as entropic warfare, where you try to um, disintegrate, fragment society from the inside. You do it with fentanyl. You do it with, this, pitting society against itself, creating distrust in institutions. You try to break and fragment society, like through this entropic warfare, using unrestricted warfare as described in in the books by the two PLA Air Force colonels in 1999. And it's all the Chinese telegraph their punches. And the end result is you've got a society that's ripping itself apart from the inside, and it becomes much easier for the proxies that you've backed to take over elements of control and influence.
Yeah, it's amazing. To me, it's really, really amazing, this whole thing. And I've really not found out why. And the day I get to know, I'm going to write a book about it. Why? But coming back to, uh, pardon me for saying this, huh? Before you
Please.
kind of slap me through the screen, but your country, Canada.
Uh-huh.
What's up with Trudeau? How does he think? Because I believe, what's that deputy prime minister's name who keeps flitching? I keep
Chrystia
forgetting her name.
Freeland.
Yeah. She's preparing for a horde of migrants coming across, over 2 million of them. And they're pretty happy about it. They want to create camps and care stations and this and that and the other. They're calling it the Trump effect. And that's something which is, I'm like, really, you guys are out of housing as it is and you want to take 2 million more people. That's pretty smart. How do you think Trump is going to deal with Trudeau, knowing very well, again, the geopolitical issue? India will ask if he wants to get good with India. India's going to say, deal with that guy.
So I uh, I don't have obviously don't have access to the information that Trump
Policy
would have.
decisions, but
Yeah.
what do
No,
you
well, no,
think?
no, to intel actually.
Mhm.
So I'm on the record as having very grave concerns about the level of Chinese influence in decision making in Canadian government. Um, for me, that would be more of a suspicion, but somebody in a position of President Trump could have actual, if there is hard intelligence, he would have access to it,
True.
and so that might affect the way that he understands the situation, and uh, and if that is a real concern, then you can imagine that um, the people involved in being influenced would be very scared of having to deal with a Trump that has those files on them.
Hmm.
So that may resolve itself, but I don't, as I said, that's not information I
Speculate.
have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but if the policy of the U.S. it under Trump 2.0 is similar to Trump 1.0, where as regards to India, and that Diwali tweet is an indication that it might be. And the picks that he's made are picks that
Yeah, the head of the
uh,
India caucus and this and that. They're all
yeah,
mostly pro India. Yeah.
yeah, and if you don't even have to be pro India. You just have to be actively defensive against China, and then you appreciate what India has done. You appreciate the how India responded after Galwan. You appreciate, the knowledge within India about how to handle these political warfare issues, about how India has been trying within its own sphere to create an alternative with the G20, with Indian Ocean partners, with BIMSTEC. Like the whole region, India has been trying to figure out another way of offering countries an alternative to China, especially within the developing world, and the natural compatibilities within the two countries. But so if you're ideally you understand India, but even if you're just concerned about China in a comprehensive way, then you see how important India is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. You know, that's, I mean, not that we're looking for a whole lot from anybody for that matter. It's more or less a
Leave us alone.
leave us alone.
That's right.
Just let us do our thing, you do yours, and you don't want to supply weapons to us, you don't want to give us this and that. Fair enough. Keep it where the sun doesn't shine. We don't want that. But just don't keep on interfering with us. And isn't that we're the only country in the world that has actually given a kick to China, not once, not twice, but three times.
Yep.
Militarily, economically, which 90% of the world doesn't even want to think about doing, leave alone doing it. I mean, there's obviously a certain amount of deterrence that India has created. That's why China wants to go back.
Mm.
It's very, very clear. He's not doing his spyware in the Indian Ocean that he used to. He's not doing the kind of political warfare that he used to. He's actually, honestly, he's with his hands off. Okay, listen, I'm I just oh, we have tensions, let them be there, but I'm not increasing those tensions. And that's something that you can see with China. There's a
Mm.
certain amount of realism that they've kind of learned, especially with their relation with India, and we don't trust them, right? We don't trust them. The political leadership doesn't, the people don't, the analysts don't for sure. But you can see the kind of realism China is working with, and fair enough, you'll respect it and appreciate it. China's an enemy I would respect. You know, America is becoming an adversary and an enemy today because of the positions it's taken. And that's something which is very weird. Lastly, I'll ask you one simple, very, very simple question. Where do you see the world heading uh, in a Trumper America? Because will it become America first, the dollar dominance, the whole de-dollarization thing, BRICS and this and that.
Mhm.
How do you think America is going to deal with all this stuff? Because
So
a
I think
lot
that
of water has flowed under the bridge since 2020.
yeah. So it's not isolationist, and the America First policy isn't isolationist. It's
It's not, yeah, I know.
no,
Mm.
and it's not. The thing about with NATO, for example, is you know Trump was right about NATO. It
Yeah,
wasn't they weren't geared up to protect themselves,
you bet.
and yeah, and we so it wasn't that he was against NATO member countries. He thought that they were leaving themselves vulnerable, and he didn't want to have to have Americans die because they
Yeah.
weren't doing what they needed to do. And
Hmm.
I think that that's indicative of an approach that actually suits India very well. They want a if the last administration is anything to go by, and if I can tell anything from the picks that have been picked so far, and if there's a lot of ifs here, if I kind of understand a little bit about what India wants, which is India will fight its own fights, but if it can get help for in certain areas around you know information sharing or things like that, that it has very good access to all of that already, but sometimes it can use a little bit more, then all the better. And some sorry, maybe some gear, and it doesn't want to be antagonized. That's the sort of partner that an American first president wants. Somebody who's not asking for a bunch of stuff except the things that it might need to fight a common enemy anyway. So,
That makes a lot of sense. So you're basically saying, and I'm sorry, but
yeah,
let me rephrase what you're saying. America first doesn't want to leech.
yeah,
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Please go on.
yeah. No, it's that's how I see it. And it wants, it's difficult to underestimate. You saw that Pete Hegseth discussion with Sean
Hmm.
Ryan, right? And the discussion around the Iraq War. There's a generation of soldiers, military people, who you know are proud of their service and all that sort of stuff, but are not proud of the decisions that were made to that led them into certain situations.
That's true.
And yeah, and they want to be proud again of what they do, and they don't want to be brought into wars that they think were at least extended for reasons that they don't think are uh, were militarily necessary or strategically necessary. So you're getting in somebody like the new Pete Hegseth, somebody who if he gets confirmed, somebody who wants to, a strong military. He wants a lethal force. He wants a fighting military. He doesn't want DEI. He wants to go back to standards from the 90s. He doesn't want transgendered issues. All of that, but he also doesn't want uh, the men and women of the U.S. military to be deployed for the sake of the
Deployment.
yeah. If he knows what it means to he I'm sure can name a lot of people who he personally knew and cared a lot about who are no longer or who have been severely affected, including through suicide, right? There's been a lot of uh, veteran suicides in the U.S. It's a crisis. It's a horrific crisis, and it's heartbreaking. And if you have been a member of the military, you want to fix that. So that's again indicative of how I think the policies will change. They want a fighting force, a lethal force that people are scared of. That is very serious, but they don't want to deploy it unless there's
It's really
a
needed.
it's really needed, and it's really needed for national security reasons.
Hmm. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to just ask you a kind of small sideline, if you don't mind, is because what I kind of look at it and what I kind of see, and just a comment is that America might not become isolationist, but America will start becoming more inward looking. Um,
Uh,
it it will kind of say these are some things I need to do for my country. Let me do that first, and I'll deal with you guys later. But having said that, that inward looking posture cannot be achieved without playing the larger global geopolitic, because America is a global player at the end of it.
mhm.
Having said that, I think it's going to be difficult for America to build up the level of, uh, I don't want to be using this word again and again, trust. Uh, it's going to be difficult for it to do that, because not just us, but the entire global south has been looking at how
Yeah.
America has been dealing with countries. This overarching presence of America, overarching pressure that would come from people, the actual president of America, if I may, or the actual bunch of presidents of America, people like Blinken and Sullivan and, all of these chaps. But that to me is a challenge that Trump will need to deal with more than anything else, because previously he could walk up to somebody and push him around a little bit and then get some negotiation out of it. Today, if he tries doing that, a lot of people are going to push back and tell him to, fudge off, because they would have had enough from the previous guys. So he might
Yeah.
just get a lot of very, very nasty responses from certain sectors.
Yeah. I mean, the U.S. is still the U.S., and it has. I mean, he's. We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
But I think your point about trust is is well taken and very important. And apart from having to rebuild trust with partners like India, trust needs to be rebuilt domestically. And you made another very important point there, which is that when in George Washington's farewell address, which is very interesting document, but because he was not a member of a political party. He didn't believe in political parties. He thought that they were very dangerous for the republic. But one of the other things he said was that the U.S. was, the terms he used, was a detached and distant land, and because of that, it could pursue a different foreign policy. It didn't have to get involved in wars. So India has however many neighbors you've got, and some of them are very hostile, and it has shaped the way that your strategic environment has evolved. The U.S. has Canada and Mexico, and Canada is certainly not a threat to the U.S. Hasn't been since the War of 1812, and Mexico, I mean, is now at a risk to the U.S. because of criminal activity, but it hasn't been a military
yeah,
threat since, I don't know, whatever, the Spanish American. I don't know my Mexican history. Or Pancho Villa. probably was when the last threat came out of there. So
Hmm.
so there has been this conceit within the US foreign policy community that the US can be isolationist. And um, so the choice has seemed to have been, the way it's framed, isolationist or not isolationist. Um, I think I would argue now, and this is something that Grant Newsham testified before Congress about, that there has been an erasure of distance. So the US is no longer detached and distant because of cyber and because of fentanyl and because of COVID and because of the World Trade Organization and because of investment policies and all that sort of stuff. All of these threats that would have been offshore threats are now domestic. So, you've got chemical, biological, cyber, and now with whoever came across the border, you may have a lot of operatives. You've got the political warfare infiltration into the education system and the media. I mean, you look at Chinese purchases of Hollywood, for example. Chinese components in cranes and in cars and in all that sort of stuff. So this is a completely different operating environment where you are your threat is your domestic environment is a foreign threat, can be a foreign threat. So
Hmm.
yeah, so distance has been erased. The enemy is inside the wire. So not only will the U.S. have to, this goes kind of to your point, have to deal with a geopolitical environment externally, but they'll have to deal with it internally as well. And part of that will be rebuilding trust with its own population, which will neutralize some of the political warfare components, not all, but some, and to roll back some of this entropic warfare that's created a paralysis or misdirection of political decision making, um, that you've seen the external result of, but Americans have been living through the internal results of.
Wow, that's a good answer, I must say. Compliments. Fantastically good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam Cleo, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I could go on for the next 2 hours. It's always a pleasure. Trust me. And
Thank you.
learn a lot.
And if the listeners or if anybody's still watching and you want to entertain yourself, go look up the Plum book, and in the comments below, put down the job that you wish you wanted from the Plum book. That's what everybody in Washington is doing. So why should they be alone? Why can't we all figure out which jobs from the Plum book we would um, like
I want to be
to?
Secretary of State. Would they give it to me?
Sure. I mean, they might end up going through a very difficult confirmation process. So
Yeah.
you may end up going to just about anybody.
It's going to be interesting to watch this raggedy old train walk going down the railway track. It's going to be very, very interesting. In any
Yeah.
case, thank you so much, and I shall catch up with you probably in the next month as you know to have this wonderful conversation again. Till then,
Always good to see you.
namaskar, all the best, bye.
Bye.